Paisley Foster was halfway through her mozzarella sticks when her best friend blurted out, "I can't go up there, Pies, I'm gonna puke." Paisley looked up from the bar, blinking at the panic in Lila's eyes. "What, why not?" "You've been practicing that song for a week." Lila clutched her stomach like she was about to hurl. "I just saw my ex walk in with his new girlfriend. I can't go up there and sing freaking Kelly Clarkson while she's sitting 2 feet away in a crop top." Paisley blew out a breath, glancing at the karaoke stage. The host was already calling names. "You want me to go up instead?" Lila's eyes widened, hopeful. "Yes, please, just pretend to be me." "No one knows us here. I signed up as Lila anyway," Paisley groaned, setting down her drink. "Fine, but you owe me a giant slice of cheesecake for this." She walked up to the stage and took the mic just as the music started. The lights were blinding, and she couldn't see anyone past the first row of tables. But she knew the song by heart. It was one of Lila's favorites, and embarrassingly, one of hers too. By the second verse, she let herself go. She wasn't thinking about being on stage or pretending to be someone else. Her voice soared in the chorus, raw and unexpectedly strong. When she hit the final note, the room erupted into loud applause. Someone whistled. She blinked under the lights, stunned, then gave a half wave and hurried off stage. "You killed it," Lila whispered, dragging her back to their table. "I think my ex's girlfriend cried," Paisley laughed, grabbing her drink. "I better get 2 slices of cheesecake now." But before Lila could respond, a voice came from behind them. "That was incredible." Paisley turned, coming face to face with a man she definitely would have remembered if she'd seen him before. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark blonde hair and a sharp jawline, he looked like he belonged on a magazine cover, not in a dive bar. She stood, unsure if he was talking to her or Lila. He smiled, his eyes staying on her. "You're Lila, right?" Lila inhaled sharply, then nodded toward Paisley. "Actually, that was Paisley. I chickened out. She covered for me." The man's smile widened, and he turned back to Paisley. "Then I owe you a drink, Paisley." She narrowed her eyes slightly. "Do you always offer drinks to strangers who sing karaoke?" "Only the ones who knock me flat with their voice." Lila nudged her under the table. Paisley hesitated, then stood. "1 drink." "Then I'm going home with my dignity," he chuckled. "Deal, I'm Graham." "Of course you are," she muttered. He raised a brow. "What does that mean? You look like a Graham." "Very confident," he grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." They moved to the bar, and he ordered 2 whiskey sours without checking the price. Paisley noticed. Most guys she met were still scanning the menu for happy hour deals. "So," she asked, taking a sip, "what brings you to this charming karaoke bar on a Thursday?" "I'm in town for a meeting. Thought I'd unwind a little before heading back to the hotel." "Work trip, something like that." She tilted her head. "Mysterious. I'll tell you more if you sing with me," she laughed. "I just got off the stage. You want an encore already?" He leaned in slightly. "I'll only ask once." There was something about him bold, smooth, but not in a creepy way. Like he was used to getting what he wanted but didn't expect it. And God help her, she was curious. "Fine," she said. "But if you pick anything by Journey, I'm walking." He smirked no, smiled, and flagged down the host. They ended up singing a duet of Shallow, which felt cliché until his voice hit the first note and she nearly forgot her own lyrics. He was good, really good. When they stepped off stage, the bar was buzzing. Paisley turned to him, breathless. "Okay. What do you actually do?" He looked down at her, eyes gleaming. "Promise not to run, not unless you're a cult leader." "I own a few companies. Tech stuff, real estate." She blinked. "So, you're a businessman." Something like that. The way he said it set off a little alarm in her head. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't saying everything. "You're not gonna elaborate," he shrugged. "I don't usually talk about work on nights like this." She stepped back, suddenly unsure. "You're not married, are you?" "No, single, very single." She studied him. "Then what's the catch?" "No catch." Lila appeared beside her. "Pies, we should go. You've got work at 8, remember?" Graham looked disappointed, but he nodded. "Can I see you again?" Paisley hesitated. This was fun. "But I don't really do the whole meet a guy at a bar thing." "Then don't think of it as that." He slipped a card into her hand. "Think of it as a night that didn't end yet." She looked down. It was black, embossed with his name and a logo she vaguely recognized. Aldrin Group. Her breath caught. She looked back up. Wait, Graham Alderon, like Alderon Tech, Alderon Towers, he nodded slowly. I was hoping you'd know me for something other than that. You're a millionaire, technically. She took a step back, overwhelmed. This is insane. I covered for my friend at karaoke and now a millionaire wants to take me out, he smiled. You sang like you meant it, that's rare, she swallowed. I'm a receptionist at a dental office. He stepped closer. And I'm standing here wishing you'd say yes to dinner. Her heart thudded. Lila whispered, say yes before he disappears in a helicopter or something. Paisley looked at Graham, then down at the card. Okay, she said quietly. Dinner. He smiled like she'd just given him the world. Tomorrow night, she nodded. He leaned in. I'll pick you up at 7, wear whatever makes you feel like you. And just like that, he was gone. Paisley sat back down, stunned. You good? Lila asked. I think I just agreed to dinner with a millionaire. Lila grinned. And you didn't even have to wear a crop top. Paisley stood in front of her closet the next evening, staring at a half-zipped garment bag she hadn't touched in months. Lila lounged on the bed behind her, flipping through a magazine with a bowl of popcorn balanced on her stomach. I don't know why you're freaking out, Lila said. He already saw you in jeans and a band tee. You sang Lady Gaga in front of him and lived to tell the tale. Paisley didn't answer. She pulled the dress from the bag, a deep sapphire blue, sleeveless, with a flowing midi skirt and a neckline that made her feel like a grown woman instead of someone who still bought grocery store sushi on sale. She'd bought it for a cousin's engagement party that got canceled, and it had hung in her closet ever since, waiting for a moment that felt big enough. Tonight felt like that moment. He's picking me up, Paisley muttered, running her hands down the fabric. What does that even mean? Is he driving? Sending a car, does he have a driver? He probably has a fleet, Lila said through a mouthful of popcorn. You think he's gonna roll up in a Prius? Girl, please. Paisley turned. What if it's not a car at all? What if he shows up in some ridiculous way, like a boat? Or a horse? Now I'm hoping it's a horse, Lila grinned. That would be iconic. At exactly 7, the doorbell rang. Paisley's stomach dropped. She gave herself one last look in the mirror, then opened the door. Graham stood there in a charcoal gray suit that fit his frame like it was sewn onto him. No tie, white shirt unbuttoned just enough to make her pulse skip. In one hand he held a tiny velvet box. Paisley, he said, voice low and warm, you look. Stunning doesn't even cover it, she blinked at the box. Please don't tell me that's jewelry. It's not, he said, offering it to her. Just a little something, thought it might go with the dress. Inside was a pair of earrings, delicate silver hoops set with tiny sapphires, not flashy, subtle. Thoughtful, she glanced up. How did you know the color? I didn't, he said. I guessed. She hesitated, then took them and stepped aside. Give me 30 seconds. In the bathroom, she clipped them on with trembling fingers. The cool metal felt too elegant for her ears. When she returned, he was still standing by the door, hands in his pockets, watching her like she might disappear. You ready? He asked. Do I get a hint where we're going? He shook his head. Let me surprise you. Outside, a sleek black car idled at the curb. The driver wore a uniform and opened the door before either of them could reach for it. Paisley slid in, acutely aware of the buttery leather and scent of something expensive she couldn't name. As they pulled into traffic, she turned to him. You travel with a driver? When I'm in the city, yeah, he said, glancing out the window. Parking's a nightmare. That's your reason. He looked back at her. Also, I like having both hands free when I'm with someone interesting. She looked away, heat creeping up her neck. The car stopped outside a building she didn't recognize. From the street, it looked like nothing special, just an old brick facade with dark windows. But as soon as they stepped through the doors, the air changed. A host greeted Graham immediately, leading them through a hallway lined with flickering candles. The room they entered was dim and intimate, with only a handful of tables and a glass ceiling that opened to the stars. Paisley froze. This is not what I expected. It's a private dining club, he said, pulling out her chair. Membership only. There's no menu. The chef sends out whatever's fresh and in season. She sat slowly. So we're just trusting a stranger to feed us. He poured her a glass of wine from a tall, frosted bottle. That's what makes it exciting. As the first course arrived, something delicate with truffle and citrus, Paisley leaned in. Okay. You said you don't talk about work on nights like this, but I need to ask, what exactly do you do? Graham set down his fork. I acquire companies, mostly tech, occasionally real estate. I look for things that are undervalued, fix what's broken, and help them grow. She tilted her head. So like a mechanic, but for businesses, he chuckled. That's one way to put it. Do you like it? He paused. I'm good at it. That doesn't always mean the same thing. She studied him. That sounds like someone who's done it too long. He met her eyes. That sounds like someone who sees through people. A waiter arrived with the next course, seared scallops with saffron risotto. Paisley picked up her fork, but she wasn't hungry anymore, not in the usual sense. She wanted to know more. What did you want to be? She asked. Before you were fixing companies, he leaned back. A musician, she blinked. Seriously? I studied classical piano, had a scholarship, but money ran out and I had to make choices. He shrugged. Turns out being broke isn't nearly as poetic as movies make it seem. Do you still play? Not often, haven't had time. She set her fork down. That's sad. Maybe, he said, eyes on her, but tonight doesn't feel like a loss. Her breath caught. The final course was chocolate and something floral she couldn't pronounce. When the check came, Graham didn't even look at it, just signed and stood. Back in the car, silence stretched between them, a charged, unspoken thread neither seemed willing to cut. He walked her to the door. I had a good time, he said. So did I. He hesitated. Can I see you again? She nodded, heart thudding. You already know where I live. He smiled, small, real. Then I'll take that as a yes. She watched until he disappeared into the car, its taillights vanishing down the street like a dream she hadn't meant to fall into. Inside, Lila was asleep on the couch, a blanket half draped over her legs and the popcorn bowl empty. Paisley toed off her shoes, then sat on the edge of the couch, earrings still glinting in her ears, her pulse still not quite steady. She wasn't sure what had just started, but she had a feeling it wasn't going to be simple. Paisley pushed open the front door of Alderon Tower and stepped into a world that didn't seem to obey the same rules as her own. The lobby stretched upward in a cathedral of glass and steel, crowned with a chandelier that looked more like a constellation than a light fixture. She clutched her purse tighter, resisting the urge to check her reflection again in the polished marble floors. A young woman in a navy blazer approached her with a tablet in hand. Miss Foster? Yes, she said, trying not to sound breathless. Mr. Alderon is finishing a meeting. He asked me to take you up. The elevator was silent as it rose, almost unnervingly smooth. Paisley's reflection stared back at her in the mirrored walls, hair curled just enough, lipstick a shade bolder than usual. She'd chosen a sleeveless cream blouse and tailored pants, confident without pretending. She couldn't explain why, but this didn't feel like a normal date. Graham hadn't said where they were going, only that he wanted her to see his world. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped directly into a penthouse that belonged in a design magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, while sleek furniture in shades of slate and ivory gave the space a quiet elegance. A black grand piano sat near the far wall, gleaming under the recessed lighting. You made it. She turned, startled to find Graham standing at the far end of the room. He wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, no jacket, no tie. Casual, but somehow sharper than anyone she'd ever known. I wasn't sure I was in the right place, she said, walking toward him. There wasn't a single carpet stain or flickering light. I almost turned around. He laughed quietly and offered her a glass of something that smelled like citrus and herbs. This is where I work when I'm home. I thought it was time you saw it. She took the glass. You live here? Sometimes. I keep it mostly for meetings or when I want privacy. So, now you're showing me your private side. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he crossed to the piano and lifted the lid with care. Remember what I told you about music, she nodded, watching him lower onto the bench. I had this moved in last year, haven't played it much, figured I'd wait until I had a reason. He glanced over his shoulder. Want to hear something? Paisley's throat went dry. Only if you want to. His fingers touched the keys with the kind of grace that made everything else fall away. The melody was unfamiliar, slow, and aching, like a memory trying to surface. She stood frozen, the notes wrapping around her like velvet. When he stopped, the silence felt reverent. "That was beautiful," she said. "I wrote it in college," he said quietly. "Used to think I'd be playing it for thousands." "Why didn't you?" He closed the lid. "Because I learned the hard way that dreams don't pay hospital bills." She stepped closer, setting her drink down. "You took care of someone, my mom. She got sick when I was 20, cancer. We didn't have insurance, and I couldn't stand the idea of watching her fade in a hospital that treated her like a number." He looked out the window, jaw tight. "So I dropped out, started flipping tech licenses online. Turned out I was good at making things profitable." She didn't reach for him. Didn't say sorry, just stood beside him in the quiet. He turned to her after a long moment. "I don't usually tell people that. Why did you tell me?" "Because I don't know why, but when I'm with you, I forget how to keep the doors locked." She swallowed hard. "That's a dangerous thing to admit to someone you barely know." "Maybe, or maybe it's the first honest thing I've said in months." He moved toward her, not rushed, but with purpose, like he'd already decided. She didn't lean away when his hand brushed her cheek. He paused there, thumb resting just below her jaw. "I haven't been this unsure in years," he said. "Then why keep going?" "Because I'd rather be uncertain with you than confident alone." She wasn't sure who closed the distance. Maybe they both did. But when his mouth found hers, it wasn't the fireworks kind of kiss. It was quieter, more deliberate, like a thread being pulled tight between them. His hand slid around her waist, anchoring her, and hers found the curve of his shoulder, the fabric warm beneath her fingers. When they parted, she stayed close. "Are you always like this?" she asked, voice low. "How do you mean?" Composed, strategic, like you're always 10 moves ahead. He gave a half laugh. "Not with you. With you, I feel like I'm playing a game I never learned the rules to." "Good," she murmured. "Then we're even." He stepped back, eyes searching hers. "Come with me tomorrow." "Where?" "There's a benefit dinner, black tie, boring speeches, too many courses, but I want you there." She hesitated. "This isn't my world, Graham, I know, that's why I want you in it." Her heart beat faster. "You're not worried I'll embarrass you?" "You're the only thing that's felt real in weeks. If anything, I'm worried I'll embarrass you." She looked around the penthouse again, the glass and steel and silence. And then at him, this man who had everything, yet looked at her like she was the thing he wanted most. "Okay," she said, "but I'm not renting a $500 dress." He nodded slowly. "You won't have to?" "I won't." His eyes glinted. "I'll take care of it." "That's not necessary." "I know," he said, "but I want to." She didn't argue, not because she needed the help, but because something in his voice told her this wasn't about money, it was about her letting him in. As he walked her to the elevator, she glanced back at the piano. "You should play more often." "I will," he said, "if you promise to keep showing up." The elevator doors closed between them, but she didn't feel the usual panic that came with stepping into something new. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she'd stepped into something that mattered, and it terrified her in the best way possible. The ballroom shimmered with candlelight, the kind that flickered against crystal and made everything look like a dream no one dared wake from. Paisley stood just inside the entrance, her breath caught in her throat as she took it all in rows of tables dressed in ivory silk. A string quartet playing something haunting and perfect, and chandeliers that looked like they'd been lifted from Versailles. She barely recognized herself in the mirror-lined walls. The dress Graham had sent earlier that day, a deep burgundy column with subtle gold threading, fit her like it had been made for her alone. She hadn't asked how he'd known her size. She hadn't asked how he'd known what would make her feel powerful and beautiful without being obvious. He just had. "Don't look so worried," Graham said behind her, his hand brushing the small of her back. "You belong here more than half the people in this room." "I'm not worried," she replied, eyes scanning the crowd. "Just aware that my usual Friday night involves reruns and takeout." He leaned close to her ear, his breath warm. "I'd take that over half these speeches." A man in a tuxedo approached, smiling broadly. "Graham, good to see you. I didn't know you were bringing a guest." "This is Paisley," Graham said, his voice calm but firm. "She's with me." Paisley extended a hand, and the man shook it, polite but clearly surprised. As he moved on, she turned to Graham. Does that happen a lot? What? People giving me the once-over. Like they're trying to figure out the math of how I ended up here. They're just not used to seeing something authentic, he said. Most of what's in this room is borrowed sparkle. She studied him. And me, you're the real thing. He guided her toward their table, where several people already sat, executives from companies she didn't recognize, dressed in tailored suits and designer gowns. Graham introduced her with ease, and she nodded politely, careful to observe more than she spoke. But as the evening wore on, something shifted. She found herself laughing at a woman's story about a charity auction gone wrong, asking questions about a tech grant another guest was sponsoring. She wasn't faking interest to impress anyone, she was genuinely curious, and people noticed. More than one turned to her with a second question, a real one, as if recalibrating their first impression. At one point, Graham's hand found hers beneath the table. He didn't say anything, just held it, steady and sure. After the dinner, as dessert plates were cleared and champagne reappeared, Graham leaned toward her. "There's someone I want you to meet." She followed him through a side corridor, the music fading behind them. They exited onto a rooftop terrace where a few guests lingered in quiet conversation. At the far end stood a woman in her 60s, silver hair pinned back, wearing a navy dress with a brooch shaped like a crescent moon. "Paisley," Graham said, his voice softer than before, "this is Carmen. She helped me get my first business off the ground." Carmen turned, her smile kind and knowing. "So this is the woman who got you to dust off the piano." Paisley blinked. "He told you that. He didn't have to, I can see it." Carmen took her hand. "He doesn't bring many people into his real life." "You must have done something right." "I'm not sure I did anything," she said. "Oh, you did," Carmen replied, eyes twinkling. "You made him slow down." When Carmen stepped away to greet someone else, Paisley turned to Graham. "She's important to you. She believed in me before anyone else did. When all I had was a half-baked idea and a fried motherboard. You've built so much since then." He looked at her, serious now. "None of it mattered until you walked into that bar." She felt the words land deep, settling somewhere she hadn't even known was empty. "I'm not used to any of this," she said. "The clothes, the attention, the way people look at you when you walk into a room, I know. And I'm not sure I'd ever want to live in this world full-time. I like mine. It's messy and loud and full of people who don't own cufflinks." "I don't want to change your world," he said. "I just want to be in it, or bring you into mine when and how you choose." She looked away toward the skyline. "I don't want to be a phase. You're not. I don't want to be something you forget once the novelty wears off. I couldn't forget you if I tried." Paisley. When he said her name like that, all the noise faded. "I almost didn't go up on that stage," she admitted. "I only did it for Lila. If you hadn't, I wouldn't have known someone like you existed." She turned to him. "What does this look like to you?" "Us." He didn't hesitate. "It looks like the first time I've wanted something I can't build, invest in, or outthink. It looks like something I have to feel." And then he dropped to one knee. Her heart stopped. He didn't pull out a ring, just reached for her hand. "I'm not asking you to marry me right now. I'm asking you not to walk away when things get complicated. I'm asking you to trust that I'm all in. That this isn't a game, that you're not a detour." She blinked, breath catching. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." She pulled him up by the lapels of his jacket and kissed him, hard and certain. "You're impossible, I know, but so am I. That's why we'll work." They stood there, the city glittering below them, the night warm with possibility. Later, as the car drove them home, she leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. "I still can't believe you found me because I sang someone else's song." He turned to her, brushing a hand over her hair. "You sang it like it was yours, and that was all it took." Because somehow, through one borrowed microphone, one impulsive choice, and one unexpected voice in the dark, she hadn't just stepped into his world. He had stepped into hers, and neither of them was ever going back. Paisley stepped out of the elevator into the Alderon Group headquarters, her heels clicking nervously against the polished floor. The receptionist greeted her with a warm smile and pointed her toward a private conference room. She wasn't here for a meeting, not technically. Graham had invited her to sit in on a strategy session for a nonprofit initiative he was starting. She'd been surprised when he asked, but he'd told her plainly, "I trust your instincts more than half the people on my board." The conference room was filled with sleek screens and expensive suits. Graham sat at the head of the table, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled. His presence was effortless but commanding, and as he glanced up and saw her through the glass, something in his expression softened. He didn't interrupt the discussion. Instead, he motioned for her to come and sit beside him. She took the seat, unfamiliar with the language being tossed around target metrics, capital structuring, philanthropic ROI, but she listened, watched, and slowly began to understand. At one point, a man across the table, a chief operations officer, judging by his badge, leaned forward. "Graham, we can scale this to 6 cities within the year, but we'll need to secure new partners. That means more leverage, more PR, and a bigger media rollout." "Leverage how?" Paisley asked before she could stop herself. The room paused. The COO blinked, caught off guard. Graham didn't miss a beat. "Paisley, go ahead," she cleared her throat. "If the goal is genuine community impact, you don't leverage that for image. You highlight the outcomes, not the funding. Tell real stories. People connect to people, not concepts." The COO hesitated, then nodded slowly. "That's actually a great point." Graham glanced at her, eyes warm. "I told you she's sharp." After the meeting, as they walked out onto the rooftop garden just outside the boardroom, Paisley crossed her arms. "You sure I didn't overstep in there?" "I'm counting on you to overstep," Graham said. "You're the only person in my life who says what they mean without dressing it up." She leaned against the railing, looking out over the city. "I've never felt so out of my depth and still wanted to keep going." He stepped behind her, arms sliding around her waist. "That's how I feel every time I look at you." She turned in his arms. "You realize this is starting to feel like more than just a whirlwind." "I was hoping it would." He kissed her forehead gently. "I want you at my side, not just in my life. This past month has shown me more than any boardroom ever could that building a future means nothing if I'm building it alone." Her breath caught. "You mean that?" "I've never been more certain of anything," he said. "I don't care about headlines or shareholders. I care about waking up next to you, watching you steal the covers, hearing you argue about which cereal is better." She laughed. "Raisin Bran is objectively superior." "See, that's what I mean." He grinned and kissed her again, deeper this time. "You challenge me, you make me better. You're not afraid of this world, even when it tries to intimidate you. You walk into rooms like you belong, even when you don't realize you already do." They left the office together, hand in hand, and as the elevator descended, she leaned against him. "Do you still think about playing music again?" she asked softly. "I think about it more now than I have in years." "So play." He looked at her, then nodded. "Will you be there?" "Every time." That weekend, Graham hosted a private fundraiser concert in his penthouse, not for publicity, but for purpose. He played 3 original pieces on the grand piano, all of them written during the years he'd stopped believing in anything softer than a balance sheet. Paisley sat in the front row, her fingers laced in her lap, tears in her eyes. After the final note faded, he turned to her and said, "That last one, I wrote that the night after our first date." Their guests applauded, but she barely heard them. Her heart felt too full. Later, while they stood on the balcony overlooking the skyline, champagne in hand, Graham reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. Paisley's eyes widened. "Is that I've made a lot of decisions in my life, some fast, some calculated. But this one I've never been more certain of." She stared at him, her throat tight. "I love you, Paisley. I love you in a way I didn't know was possible. I don't want to go another day calling you my girlfriend when I know you were meant to be so much more." He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. "Marry me?" Her answer came without hesitation. Yes. They were married 3 months later in a garden in Napa, surrounded by close friends and family. Lila officiated, barely getting through the ceremony without crying. Carmen gave a toast that made everyone laugh and then fall silent in reverence. Paisley wore a simple dress with embroidered vines curling up from the hem. Graham wore no tie, just a linen suit and a look in his eyes that said he'd found his home. They didn't fly off to a private island that night. Instead, they stayed up with their friends, barefoot in the grass, dancing under string lights. Graham built a music program in his mother's name, one that gave scholarships to underprivileged kids with talent and nowhere to go. Paisley helped run it, drawing on her natural empathy and fierce heart. She also launched a podcast about the intersections of love, ambition, and identity, a raw, funny, fearless series that gained traction fast. They made a rule. One night a week belonged to them and only them. No phones, no meetings. Just dinners on the terrace, long walks through the city, and music, always music. One evening, a year after their wedding, they returned to the bar where they first met. The lights were still dim, the mic still scratched, and the crowd still delightfully off-key. Paisley stepped up to the mic, turned to Graham, and said, "This one's for the moment everything changed," she sang. He watched, and the world once again felt quiet and perfect, because in the end it wasn't the wealth, the skyline, or the spotlight that mattered. It was the way he looked at her when the crowd disappeared, and the way she always sang like she meant it.